All right. Well, Zach, thanks for joining us today for our engineering offsite past video.
Makes me feel like a dinosaur.
I know we all feel a little like that sometimes. So how long ago did you start with Walters and Wolf?
I was hired on in 2008. So this was before smartphones. Well, smartphones had just started. I don't think anyone had a smartphone back then. It was pretty funny thinking about it back in the day. Because now it's so everywhere, We all had desk phones back then. And I was hired on to work under Esley in the drafting department. So I think I interviewed with Esley and you. I did the AutoCAD test, which I have a funny story about that AutoCAD test because I hadn't touched AutoCAD in 10 years or so at that point. So, and one of the things was, it was like a triangle or something like that. I don't know. It's something where I had to do something at 60 degrees and I could not for the life of me remember how to draw something at 60 degrees. And then I was trying all kinds of different things. I was trying to do it with polar coordinates. And eventually I think I just did a compass construction or something with a bunch of circles to do it because I couldn't remember that you just have to hold down, do shift, comma, less than sign to do a polar coordinate. Because I learned AutoCAD back, in the DOS days. So I typed in a lot of coordinates and stuff. That's how I used to draw a lot.
What was your first version of AutoCAD?
Release 12 back in MS-DOS 6.22 or whatever it was.
Right before 3.1, right? Like right before Windows, right?
Yeah, I think the machines that I learned on had Windows, but we didn't have AutoCAD for Windows. So the class that I was in, I learned in a community college class, and the first parts of the class were just learning how to use DOS, like dir and cd and change your drive to your floppy disk kind of thing, and how to copy files and get around. And that was all very weird because in elementary school, we always learned on Macs, like Mac Classics, and it was a lot easier. So it felt like I was in the real world when I had to start using a text interface, a console interface to do those kind of file operations. So the class started with that, and then we went into how to actually start AutoCAD and use it. And we did have digitizer tablets. We didn't have mice. And a digitizer, for anyone who's unfamiliar, is like a mouse, just kind of clunkier and better in some ways, but worse in a lot of other ways. So, but yeah, that's kind of where I started.
So you had some programming experience before you came here, right? What had you done prior to coming here?
So that same AutoCAD class, I took it back in 92 or 93. I forgot when. It was just a summer class between my normal classes. And my dad worked at the community college, so he knew the teacher and he got me in this class, even though I had no prerequisites. Back then, the prerequisites were hand drafting. You had to know how to do hand drafting before you can learn AutoCAD. So he just gave me a book on hand drafting, and I kind of skimmed through it a little bit just to see what it was about. He knew I wanted to be an architect because when I was a kid, I told him I like to draw, and he's like, well, maybe you want to be an architect. I was like, okay, I want to be an architect. And that was just kind of the thing for a long time. So this was like the first step. And I was doing AutoCAD stuff. I liked it. I did really well in the class. And then I did 3D AutoCAD for the next semester. And then after that, I did AutoLisp, which was my first programming language, was AutoLisp. Which still exists, and I'm still very familiar with it. I still like AutoLisp, but I think I've told you this before, Steve. Once you learn one programming languages and you learn how one of them works, other programming languages are they're a little easier. They're a lot easier to learn. Yeah. Once you get in that mindset, it's a lot easier to learn more languages. So after AutoLisp, I finished high school and went to college, took AutoCAD again in college. But I already knew it, so that was like the easiest class I ever had. And I, during my normal engineering classes in college, we learned some more programming languages like MATLAB, things like that. I taught myself other languages just with side projects, like taught myself PHP, C# at that time a little bit, and JavaScript. But again, once you learn one language, other languages are a lot easier to learn. They're all kind of based on the same ideas. They're just plays off of different ways to type the same kind of ideas. Once you have the ideas, you're good. And then I started at Walters and Wolf. So at that point, I was only comfortable with Autolisp, PHP, and to a lesser degree JavaScript. C# I think was too far in the past for me to remember it that well. And I think I only did like most of these things other than Autolisp, I'd only dealt with a lot of these programming languages for like a month or whatever, just to do one thing that I wanted to do, like try out making a website or whatever.
Right.
But then when I started working at Walters and Wolf, I started in drafting, but that only lasted like a week. And then I started getting this code. I think it started in Excel. I don't remember exactly, but it was VBA. It was VBA for sure, whatever it was. It might have been AutoCAD code in VBA or Excel or Access code in VBA. It was probably Excel. So I started to learn VBA at that point, taught myself that while on the job. And like I said, programming languages are all kind of the same. So learned that. And then we started to work on V6. And I was put in charge of that, given the code for the takeoff program, which was all in VBA at that point. I guess there was a little bit in C++, but that was kind of like compiled and then forgotten. So I taught myself VBA, was working on V6 stuff and interacting with that database. Oh, I also knew SQL from previous attempts, but that's not really a programming language, so I kind of forgot about it. But I got a lot better with SQL and joins and stuff, working with with V6, because a lot of their stuff is in tables on the SQL server. So I learned a lot about relational databases through all that, and Access, and bringing in data from tables and putting them together into reports, and writing code to make the takeoff program work with V6, which was, we pursued V6 for, what was it, 3 years maybe?
Yeah, at least 2, but maybe 3, yeah.
But there were just some inherent problems with V6 that were hard to get around, I think. I think the program would have worked if it was more customizable and worked faster. Like, they're saving curtain walls in V6 was like a 30-minute chore, where you just push the button and you sit there and hope it finishes for 30 minutes. The thing was really designed for small storefronts, so it didn't really work when you started giving it a whole lot of stuff to deal with. And then we were using that with the takeoff program, which instead of reading taglines, was reading geometry out of V6. I don't remember exactly how all that worked. I called it takeoff 8 because it spun off a takeoff 7. But eventually, everyone got fed up with V6, literally everyone. Yes. And we just abandoned it, like just did a 180, complete 180 overnight, got rid of V6 and just went back to AutoCAD and the takeoff program. And then I started takeoff 9. And most of that and we're still on takeoff 9. And a lot of that, a lot of takeoff 9, what takeoff 9 did was I think the biggest thing it did was put UPD inside of C# instead of having it in Access, running kind of out of process, where AutoCAD would talk to the Access database out of process. It moved it into AutoCAD. That was the first major thing that takeoff 9 did. made UPD a lot faster. So it was a lot quicker to process drawings.
Well, there were a couple big leaps that happened after V6 because before V6, the takeoff program was all pretty cryptic. We had taglines and some kind of weird looking, elevation in the unit drawing, and then it got mark numbers. But we never had a 3D model to show us what was going on.
Yeah.
So you made that transition. And tell me a little bit about that story, like how you came up with that idea to sort of build the 3D models from the data, right?
So a lot of my inspiration was from doing the work. So like when I was working with taglines, I always found it frustrating to see what I was doing, to know what I was doing. I'd have to look at fab tickets to see how things were coming out. And it was really annoying to me. So that's kind of where I started. And I thought, why couldn't this all be in 3D? Why couldn't all of the, I mean, we're putting all of the part numbers on a use definition in the takeoff program. Why can't I just take all those part numbers, download them from the library, and extrude them at whatever length they're supposed to be, where they're supposed to be? So that's kind of where it started. Just because I wanted to see how these things were going together. It was very hard before, because you'd have to look at, your vertical detail, your horizontal detail, and trying to imagine how all those parts come together, which ones get cut where, how they notch around each other. It was all pretty hard to visualize. And I thought it would just be easier if it was all in 3D. And like I said, I took a 3D AutoCAD class a million years ago. So that's kind of where I always went with AutoCAD. It was always a 3D tool for me. I didn't do much 2D AutoCAD work at all. So that's kind of where, so I think I pitched it to you on a plane from AU or something. Or
I remember the
from
pitch,
some
yeah.
brand, something, I forgot,
Yeah.
where I was like, we could just do this all completely differently, where like I want it to be visual to where you can see what you're doing and not so difficult. I mean, there's all those difficulties still kind of exist, but most of your day-to-day stuff, making notches and figuring out the lengths of things, it's all kind of 3D and interactive now. So it's a lot easier. Once you get all the other things like layout, that kind of stuff squared away, it all became a lot easier.
No, I think that was the big thing was your ability to, do the math. I mean, you do layout to sort of represent, how the parts are represented in space in 2D, but then you're comparing that to the part on the server and translating that so that when you extrude it, it comes out right. I mean, it's a brilliant piece of software. I mean, quite honestly, like that was so impressive. And then the other piece I love is the thing you came up with the lefts and rights, because that was another thing, like, we
with auto detail
was just like such a stroke of brilliance, like just that idea that you wouldn't have to build out every single combination in the world. You just have to build out the base ones. And I think that came from a conversation we had in this room. And you said, well, when I do it, I just do this. And I'm like, well, why don't we just do that? And you were like, yeah, I think that would work. Because we were futzing around with something else that wasn't working at all. And you were like, I don't think.
Yeah, I was trying to do pretty much what auto detail does, but I was trying to make a whole new interface for it and a whole new data entry thing. But auto detail just works off of what we had already been doing, and it takes those bits and pieces and kind of intelligently puts them together in different combinations instead of making it so you have to enter in everything differently. You just use what you already had and just have some weird, strange, long naming convention to handle it all. But yeah, that turned out really well. I was pretty pleased with that. I was also very proud of the notching, the way you do notching in fab tickets, where you can make the notch either in the fab template or in the BIM model, the 3D model of the whole unit, and it will automatically create it in the other thing. Like that was really cool.
Well,
I was just trying to imagine a whole system. Yeah,
well, not only that, but that then makes Tony's life a lot nicer because it remembers that notch in the company, and he only ever has to program it once, right?
Yeah, he makes a Cam Plus thing for Quadra or whatever machine he's programming to, and attaches it to that notch, and whenever that notch appears, he'll it'll automatically attach that thing on his end. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of nice stuff that came out of that. I like how all that came out and how it works. The one thing that I still wish I still want to change is the UD window. I think it's a little crazy. It's a little too close to the data.
Yeah.
I want it to be pulled up a little bit, have a higher view, more visual view of the data rather than just a bunch of numbers and stuff. I think that's a large portion of the difficulty in using the takeoff program, is wrapping your head around all that table of data. Once you're used to it though, you want it to be a table. That's the weird part. So, but when you're learning, it's terrifying.
Well, no, exactly. And that's one of the difficulties. Part of this conference is to sort of look at, where we've been and how far we've come, where we're at today, and then have people look at, where things are going. Because we obviously, as a company, we're just dependent on the abilities of each individual. And you've had a really interesting career here, sort of growing your skills, trying new things. And people might be like, well, that's his job. That's all he has to do. Of course, he can learn programming languages or whatever. But that wasn't always the case, right? I mean, this is kind of how you've been doing things over the course of your life anyway, right? Like, this is sort of, you look at things. So what recommendations do you have for people like that are trying to learn that next skill or whatever it might be that they want to learn to sort of increase their value and their abilities? Like, how would you help people understand like a good way to move forward as they want to improve their skills?
That's a good question. I don't know. For me, it comes automatically, so it's kind of hard for me to address that. But I love learning new things. You have to not be afraid to learn new things. New things are awesome. Like, I learned so many different skill sets doing this. Like, I wanted icons for the takeoff program, so I taught myself GIMP and I watched videos on YouTube to learn how to use it. GIMP is basically a free version of Photoshop, if anyone's interested. And I've been using that. I make, all these offsite logos that you see. I usually make them in GIMP. And then one year I decided I don't want to do it with raster graphics. It's not scalable. I can't make it at any size. So I'm going to do it with vector graphics. And then I learned Inkscape. I try and learn new tools to do the job, not necessarily the easiest, but the most quality in the job. So like, I wanted vector graphics. Like, if you look at the offsite logo for this year, it's that Back to the Future looking thing. I made that all with vector graphics, so I can scale it up to any size and will look fine. And I wanted that sort of professional level of product for that logo, and I had to learn a new tool to do it. So usually I think for me, it's a desire to get something, I don't know, of a high quality. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I want it to be perfect. Right. So that necessarily makes me look for new tools and seek out new tools. Even within the programming space, like, I learn new APIs to do things all the time. I watch videos on YouTube from programmers who like show different things, and I've found different packages that I can download and make my life easier. At AU, I go to classes and I try and see, I often get like different things, packages or techniques, like test-driven development, which I'm not very good at. That's one I really have to work at. But things like that, where I can just try new things and see what's what works for me, and constantly get better, so I know what when people talk to me about things, like, I know what they're talking about. I've been there a little bit. I've explored it a little bit. I think for me, it's a natural curiosity to like, and just always a desire to learn something new. Right now I'm working on Nebula, the website, and web programming is way different than anything on the desktop. So that's been a lot of learning. I sit on Google a lot, Stack Overflow, just searching for answers for things. And I think a lot of programming tasks are like that, where you have to learn from other people who have posted something on the internet. So like if you're wanting to learn a new skill, like I always start with Google. That's just the first place I go. But usually after that, it leads me to something on YouTube, watching videos, learning new things. I love watching math and science videos. I do that a lot. Even in my off time, I watch math videos, learning new math techniques to do things. I love linear algebra. That's what you were mentioning, that with the takeoff program and the miters and stuff. That was all driven with math. Like the more different things you learn, the more you can combine them in different ways. Like me combining linear algebra with miters and stuff in the takeoff program to calculate all the compound miters, that kind of thing. So I don't know. For me, it's curiosity. I would start at Google and YouTube to learn new things. Always try and make your products better. There's a lot of software out there that will help you make things better. And, you know, you just have to be unafraid to learn those things. And even if you only use it for one project, like at least you'll have an idea of what it is and what's out there. Because if you don't know what's out there, then you don't know if what you're doing is completely backwards or not, right?
Understood, yeah, understood.
Like even just a small overview of a bunch of different things is better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're not a master, like there was something I was thinking about earlier where, Ruby. I wanted to learn the Ruby language, and it's a programming language. And I like the way it looked syntactically. It like looks really nice. And so I read a bunch of stuff on Ruby, but you know how much Ruby code I've written? Exactly zero. Exactly zero. But I know a lot about Ruby, like mixins and all these weird concepts that other programming languages don't have. So like, even if you're not going to use it, like it's still good to know these things, just to know what's out there, what's possible.
Yeah.
And then maybe use that, you know, as some sort of leaping off point for something completely new that no one's seen before, right?
Yeah, no, that's good advice. I think that's part of what we're hoping in this conference is to kind of see where we've been, you know, talk about where we are, but really get people thinking about where they're going. So I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah.
This is a good little talk, and I'm gonna
hopefully it wasn't too long.
No, break off
I
right
kind
here,
of went
brother.
off.